A Latino soldier is sentenced to life in prison until a powerful general storms into court and exposes the shocking truth. The courtroom was suffocatingly quiet, heavy with the weight of unspoken judgment. A Latino soldier, Sergeant Miguel Ramirez, stood in his dress uniform, his wrists bound in cold steel cuffs that reflected the harsh fluorescent light above. His broad shoulders, once symbols of valor, now drooped beneath invisible chains heavier than the iron on his wrists. At the bench sat Judge Wilkins, a stern, gray-haired man whose expression bore no trace of compassion. He adjusted his glasses, peering over them at Miguel as though the young man before him was nothing more than a case file, a number on the docket, not a human being who had once bled for his country. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced attorney named Karen Holt, moved with precision, each step toward the jury calculated. Her words cut through the air. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Sergeant Ramirez is not here because of his service. He is here because he betrayed the law. This man assaulted a superior officer, disobeyed direct orders, and endangered lives. Military hero or not, no one is above justice. Miguel clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He wanted to speak, to shout the truth, but his defense attorney, a timid public defender assigned at the last minute, placed a warning hand on his arm. The jury avoided Miguel's gaze. They'd seen the evidence Holt presented, grainy security footage, snippets of testimony taken out of context. But they hadn't seen the whole truth. They didn't know the corruption that had eaten through the ranks or how Miguel had stood against a cover-up that reached higher than anyone in this room could imagine. Still, Miguel said nothing. He had learned discipline, restraint, but his heart pounded with frustration. He wasn't fighting just for himself. He was fighting for every soldier silenced by injustice. When it was time for him to speak, his voice was steady but heavy with conviction. I did what I had to do. I wasn't protecting myself. I was protecting my men. The orders were unlawful, and I refused to let them die for someone's pride. Judge Wilkins' gavel struck once, silencing him. Sergeant Ramirez, you will not use this courtroom as a platform for excuses. The jury will deliberate. The jury filed out. Minutes dragged into hours. Miguel's mother, an older woman with calloused hands from years of factory work, sat in the gallery clutching a rosary. Every bead slipped between her fingers with silent prayers. His younger sister, Elena, stared at the judge with unblinking defiance, her dark eyes filled with fire. Finally, the jury returned. The foreman stood, his voice steady but carrying the finality of a gunshot. Guilty, Your Honor. Gasps filled the room. Miguel's mother sobbed quietly, pressing the rosary to her lips. Miguel's jaw clenched, but his gaze never wavered. He stood tall, a soldier even in chains. Judge Wilkins adjusted his glasses again and cleared his throat. Sergeant Miguel Ramirez, for your crimes of insubordination, assault, and dereliction of duty, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The gavel slammed down. The sound echoed like the closing of an iron cell door. Miguel's mother collapsed into her daughter's arms. His defense attorney lowered his head in shame. The bailiff moved forward to escort Miguel away, but Miguel did not lower his eyes. He stared directly at the judge, his voice low but unwavering. You are sentencing a soldier who fought for you. Remember that when you sleep tonight. The judge dismissed him with a wave of the gavel, already turning to the next case, and that was when the heavy oak doors of the courtroom burst open. The sudden crash of the courtroom doors jolted everyone to silence. Heads whipped toward the back, where a towering figure in full dress uniform stormed down the aisle, the sound of polished boots striking the marble floor like thunder. It was General Nathaniel Carter, a decorated war hero whose reputation preceded him. His chest bore rows of medals, his presence commanding every eye in the room. Even Judge Wilkins froze mid-sentence, his gavel suspended in the air. Who is this? The judge began, but the general cut him off with a voice that carried the weight of command. I am General Carter, commander of the United States Northern Command. And this trial, he jabbed a finger toward the bench, is a disgrace to the uniform, to the court, and to this nation. A murmur spread through the gallery like wildfire. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, and the bailiff, unsure whether to intervene, looked helplessly at the judge. Carter strode to the defense table and placed a firm hand on Miguel's shoulder. At ease, Sergeant. You are not alone anymore. Miguel's eyes widened in disbelief. He had never met the general, but Carter's grip radiated a message only soldiers could understand. "I've got your back." Judge Wilkins slammed his gavel. "General Carter, you are out of order." "This is my courtroom!" "No, Judge," Carter thundered, his voice shaking the walls. "This is America's courtroom, and I will not stand by while a soldier who upheld his oath is condemned for refusing to follow an illegal order." Gasps erupted from the gallery. Miguel's mother pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming freely now, not of despair but of hope. The prosecutor rose, furious. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. General Carter has no standing in this case." Carter turned on her, eyes blazing. "Irregular? What's irregular is the sham you've been running here. I have documents, testimonies, classified reports, all proving Sergeant Ramirez acted to protect his unit from unlawful commands. Orders issued by your so-called superior officer, who, I might add, is now under federal investigation." The courtroom went silent. Judge Wilkins' face flushed crimson. "This is contempt of court." "No, Judge," Carter said coldly. "This is contempt for justice, and I will not allow you to bury the truth to protect your career." Miguel stood taller now, hope flickering in his chest. For the first time since his arrest, someone with power was standing in his corner. The judge tried to regain control, slamming the gavel again and again. "Bailiff, remove him from my courtroom immediately." But the bailiff hesitated. No one dared put hands on General Carter. The general leaned closer to the bench, his voice dropping into a tone so dangerous, it sliced through the silence like a blade. "If you think you can lock up a soldier who defended his men, you're not just unfit for the bench, you're betraying the oath you swore to this country, and I will make sure every American knows it." The tension in the courtroom was unbearable. The judge's hand shook as he gripped the gavel. The prosecutor's face had gone pale. Miguel's sister clutched their mother's hands tightly, whispering, "He's going to save him, Mama, he's going to save him." Miguel closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the moment. He wasn't just fighting for freedom anymore. This had become a battle for truth itself, and the war was just beginning. The courtroom had become a battleground. Cameras clicked rapidly, reporters whispered into recorders, and the gallery buzzed with restless anticipation. Judge Wilkins' gavel pounded against the bench, but his authority was slipping through his fingers like sand. "General Carter," he barked, "you have no jurisdiction here. This is a civil courtroom, not a military tribunal. You will remove yourself immediately or face charges of contempt." But Carter didn't flinch. He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of files bound with a red ribbon. With the sharp crack of authority, he dropped them on the defense table. "These," he declared, "are classified reports and testimonies from Sergeant Ramirez's platoon. They show exactly what happened the night in question. The orders he refused to follow would have sent his men into a kill zone knowingly. They were illegal, Judge, unlawful, and Ramirez had every right, no, every duty to refuse them." The prosecutor, Holt, rushed forward, her voice shrill. "Objection, Your Honor. This evidence is inadmissible. It hasn't gone through discovery." Carter turned slowly, his gaze locking on hers. "Inadmissible? Or inconvenient? You knew about this, didn't you, Counselor? You buried it because it would have cleared him. Tell me, did you bury it or did someone order you to?" The gallery erupted in murmurs. Holt's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Miguel's heart pounded. He had lived this nightmare, but hearing the general say it aloud with proof was like seeing the first rays of sunlight after years of darkness. He looked at his mother, whose tears now shone with relief instead of despair. Judge Wilkins' hand trembled. "You will not turn this courtroom into a circus. Sergeant Ramirez has been found guilty. Sentencing has been passed." General Carter slammed his palm against the defense table, the sound like a rifle shot. "And I say that sentence is illegitimate. You presided over a sham trial built on false evidence, suppressed testimony, and corrupted orders. This man is a hero and history will remember him that way. The only question is whether history will remember you, Judge Wilkins, as the man who tried to bury justice." The silence that followed was suffocating. The judge adjusted his glasses, sweat forming at his temple. "You tread dangerously close to contempt, General." "Then lock me up," Carter growled. "And watch what happens when the Pentagon comes knocking at your door." Every reporter's pen scratched furiously. The courtroom wasn't just a room anymore, it was a stage, and the whole country was listening. For the first time, Judge Wilkins faltered. His gavel wavered mid-air, his words losing strength. He tried to regain ground. Even if these files are authentic, they should have been introduced earlier. The conviction stands. Not anymore, Carter said, his voice steady as steel. He turned to Miguel. Stand tall, Sergeant. Miguel rose slowly, the chains on his wrists clinking like distant bells. The entire courtroom rose with him, not literally, but in spirit. People leaned forward, breathless, united in silent support. Carter faced the judge again. If you will not reopen this case, I will. Under federal military law, I have the authority to convene a tribunal. And when we do, everything you've tried to hide will come to light. You want that on record, Judge? Wilkins paled. His control had evaporated. For the first time, the balance of power in the courtroom had shifted, and it was no longer in his hands. The tension reached its breaking point. The prosecutor scrambled through her notes, desperate for a lifeline. Your Honor, if this evidence exists, it must be verified. We can't allow theatrics to dictate justice. Carter smirked, his voice a deadly calm. Theatrics? That's rich, coming from the woman who built an entire case on half-truths. Let me help you, counselor. He snapped his fingers. And a young captain in uniform entered the courtroom carrying a laptop and projector. The bailiff hesitated, but Carter's commanding presence overrode hesitation. The screen flickered to life, showing video testimony. The face of Corporal Daniels, Miguel's second-in-command, filled the screen. Testimony for the record. Daniels' voice echoed through the courtroom. Sergeant Ramirez saved our lives. The order we were given would have sent us into an ambush. He refused, and because of that we lived. He's not a criminal. He's the only reason I'm breathing today. Gasps erupted. Miguel's mother clutched Elena's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. Next came the testimony of another soldier, then another. Each one confirmed the same story. Miguel had disobeyed an order, yes, but an illegal one. He had placed his men's lives above blind obedience. He had been right. The judge's face turned ashen. Holt stammered, it could have been doctored. But the gallery erupted in outrage. Shouts of "Let him go" filled the air. Reporters typed furiously, knowing this story was no longer about a soldier's conviction. It was about the corruption of a system meant to protect justice. General Carter raised his hand, silencing the crowd. The truth is undeniable. Sergeant Ramirez acted with honor. The only crime here is the attempt to destroy his life for refusing to be complicit in unlawful commands. Miguel finally spoke, his voice strong and steady. I didn't refuse because I wanted to. I refused because I couldn't let my men walk into death for a superior officer's pride. I swore to protect this country, but that means protecting the lives of the soldiers under my command, even if it cost me mine. The room was silent. Even Judge Wilkins' gavel lay forgotten, heavy in his hand. Then Carter delivered the final blow. If you continue to enforce this sentence, Judge, I promise you, it won't just be my voice against you. It will be the voice of every soldier, every mother, every citizen who believes in justice. Do you want to be remembered as the man who condemned a hero to life in prison? Or as the man who admitted his mistake and did the right thing? The judge's hand shook violently. He looked at the crowd, at the cameras, at Miguel standing unbroken in chains. He saw his legacy crumbling in real time. And for the first time in his career, Judge Wilkins hesitated. The air was electric, every heartbeat sinking with the pounding tension in the room. Judge Wilkins shifted in his chair, his authority stripped bare. He cleared his throat, but his voice wavered. This court must review the evidence presented. The gallery erupted in cheers. Miguel's mother fell to her knees, sobbing in relief. Elena hugged her tightly, whispering, "He's coming home, Mama." He's coming home, but Carter wasn't finished. He stepped closer to the bench, lowering his voice so only Wilkins could hear. Make the right call, Judge. Don't dig this grave deeper than it already is. You know the Pentagon is watching. The country is watching. Wilkins' face twisted, torn between pride and survival. Finally, he slammed the gavel, not in defiance, but in surrender. This court hereby vacates the sentence pending a full review. Sergeant Ramirez will be released from custody immediately. The words exploded through the room like fireworks. Cheers filled the gallery. Reporters shouted questions, and soldiers in uniform saluted from the back rows. Miguel's chains were removed, the sound of the cuffs hitting the table louder than any gavel. His mother rushed forward, tears streaming as she embraced her son. Mi hijo, gracias a Dios. Elena clung to him. Her face buried against his chest, Miguel held them both, his heart swelling with gratitude, with relief, with pride. General Carter placed a hand on his shoulder. You stood tall, Sergeant. You didn't just save your men. You reminded this country what honor looks like. Miguel met his gaze. I only did what I thought was right. That's what makes you dangerous to men like him, Carter said, glancing at the judge, who sat slumped in humiliation. The cameras flashed endlessly, capturing the moment. The soldier once condemned now stood as a symbol of justice restored. But even as the cheers filled the air, Carter leaned close. His words meant only for Miguel. This isn't over. What you stood against, the corruption, the unlawful orders, it runs deeper than this courtroom. They tried to silence you once. They'll try again. Are you ready for that fight? Miguel looked at his mother, at his sister, at the sea of faces now watching him as a hero. His voice was calm, resolute. I've been ready my whole life. The doors of the courtroom opened again, not with force this time, but with reverence, as soldiers filed in to salute their comrade. The world outside was waiting, and Miguel Ramirez walked free. No longer a prisoner, but a symbol. The gavel had fallen, but justice had risen, and America would never forget the day a general barged into court and changed everything.